See, Kendrick, he plays the role of a prophet. He's not a real prophet in the spirit of truth, but he plays the role of a prophet. He plays the role of a Christ figure. But in all actuality, it's just the left hand understanding of Christ when it comes to it being really about Heru or Horus or Osiris. Because we already understand when it comes to the history that the person that is represented as Osiris, that being Nimrod, he wanted to encapsulate all the prophecies of Christ. And that's where paganism come in. 325 AD, you had the amalgamation of the pagan teachings and the biblical teachings. That's why there's so much confusion about the scriptures, because of the amalgamation of the biblical teachings and the pagan teachings. Kendrick Lamar plays the role of Christ, but not Christ in the spirit of truth. He plays the role of Christ on the left hand. Like I said, Heru is pretty much Christ in this world. When people go to church and they say they worship in Jesus Christ, they're not really worshiping Jesus Christ. That's a guise. That's just talking about Osiris or Horus or Heru. It's the same entity. That's what it's talking about. That's why Kendrick Lamar, his main veneration system is based in the worship of Osiris. That's what it is. And you see him here, he throwing up the horns. Has on the black and white, representing the Masonic principles as well as the crown of thorns, because he's blasphemous. He plays the role of a prophet or a savior. But when it comes to his aesthetic, he's the broken savior, because Mr. Morale is all about just shirking off that aspect of idolatry, but it's also confusion just when it comes to the complexity of that album. Because Kendrick Lamar stands on this high horse, or this standard of what's right for him, even if it's accepting the fact that his aunt is a tranny. But then you go back to Damn and he's talking about being an Israelite. But Damn is about him knowing what he's supposed to live up to, but he won't because he's compromised. That's what Damn is about, right? Kendrick Lamar on the song Heart Part 4, he pretty much let you know what was to come 7 years after that song was released, because it all plays into esotericism as well as the predictive aspect. MK Ultra, predictive programming. We already understand MK Ultra is inspired by Egypt, Osiris, Nimrod. You get it? It all ties together. This is all orchestrated. This whole beef shit is all orchestrated. It's all Masonic and esoteric. J. Cole had to be eliminated because the real beef or the real battle is between Drake and Kendrick Lamar. The serpent versus the Christ figure. You know, good versus evil, but you know, it's pretty much two horns on the same devil. But when you listen to the Heart Part 4, Kendrick Lamar says pi equals 314. The devil's pi is big enough to justify the whole thing. And on that same song, you know, there's utterances that can be, you know, it has a predictive vibe to it when it comes to what he's saying on the song, especially in regards to the angle between him and J. Cole, with the whole J. Cole issuing a mea culpa and saying that he don't want to engage in warfare with Kendrick Lamar after putting out a diss track and then deleting it later, hence might delete later. Just shows you that all this is scripted, because might delete later, all that stuff was before the Kendrick Lamar verse on Like That. So all this stuff was all set up. This is all a stage. You got fans, and and they don't understand because they're fans. You shouldn't be a fan, but they don't get it. This is all a Truman Show. This is all a stage. That's all this is. That's all this is. This is not real. This is a stage. But the reason why they perpetuate and they play it out is because it's esoteric. And I'm going to go more into it, but this is all esoteric. That's what this is. That song, Heart Part 4, is a prophetic song, but in the sense of what this represents. Not in the sense of any sort of righteousness, because these people aren't prophets. There's no prophets. It's just letting you know that these things were meant to happen. Kendrick Lamar is saying that y'all got to April the 7th to get y'all shit together. And then on April 7th, 7 years later, you have J. Cole, quote unquote, apologizing. April 7th, 2024, 7 years after Kendrick Lamar released that song in 2017. 777. And mind you, on the album that was to come from the Heart Part 4, because usually Kendrick Lamar, he puts out these songs, these heart songs, which is supposed to represent like a precursor to the album, something to preview before the album, like a promo single before the album. And he always uses the Heart series. It's like one of his songs where he goes his hardest. So that was the heart song for Damn, because you had the Heart Part 3, which was for Good Kid, Mad City, Heart Part 2, which was for Overly Dedicated, so on and so forth. That was for Damn. And Damn, on the song Fear, he goes into the 777 thing. So it just touches on that esotericism, the 7-day theory. You already understand what 7 represents when it comes to the Shekinah. And also the Shekinah is also synonymous with Katesh. And Katesh is the triple goddess, hence the number 3, the pyramid. All this stuff is esoteric, brothers. All this stuff is esoteric. All right, brothers. So I want you guys to pay attention because this is very, very important for us to understand. When it comes to the entertainment industry, the upper levels of society, I don't care what nobody says. You can contest it, you can scoff, you can say I'm bugging, I'm tripping. In the entertainment industry, they are masons, they are warlocks, they are esoterists or esotericists. That's what they are. And they continue to push these things. It's just that they do it in an indirect fashion. When it comes to the conveyance of it, they do it surreptitiously. You just have to pick up on it. And the reason why I'm speaking like this is because there's a lot of simple-minded people. A lot of simple-minded people. So when you look at this right here, this is the album cover for J. Cole's album Might Delete Later. And like I said, this all plays into the whole predictive aspect because Might Delete Later represents him taking the song off of his album, the diss song that he aimed at Kendrick Lamar. So it was just a predictive, aspect to it that lets you know that this shit is all scripted. It's all scripted. And not to digress, even when I was watching the game the other day, on Inside the NBA, the Miami Heat, they had beat the Boston Celtics, and Shaq had predicted the score, and he predicted it accurately, like spot on. And the funny thing about that is, Ernie, he has said, "You got the script. We've got the script." And they did it in a joking way, but you have to understand. You got to understand what this world is about. Of course, they're gonna do it in a joking way, but it's pretty much meant for you to pick up on it and understand that this shit is a stage. This shit is a stage. And I just use the NBA as an example because it just reminded me of, that whole scripted aspect. So this right here, Might Delete Later, you see these 3 bars. These 3 bars represent the 3 bars of the 8 trigrams of the I Ching. That's what this represents. You have 8 trigrams, and one of them is only whole in regards to all the 3 bars. All the other trigrams is either one has, a split, or there's other divisions when it comes to the shape. But this one trigram right here, it represents Heru. It represents the sun god. It represents Horus. That's what it represents. It represents the sun god. When it comes to the alchemical understanding, this goes back to heaven. And heaven is in reference to the sky god or the sun god known as Horus or Heru. That's what this represents. And that's why it has this enlightenment aspect to it, like this light aspect to it, this aesthetic where it's conveying this fire or this light. Why is that? Because it represents the sun. It represents the sun. It represents heaven. It represents being at that zenith, being at that height. That's what it represents. J. Cole is a Mason. J. Cole is an esotericist. That's what he is. That's what he is. And this is what he's conveying. This is what he's showing you. The predictive aspect of it. Even going back to 7 years ago. Mind you, right? Damn had an aesthetic where the color was red. And not only about the color, but just talking about the color red. Damn had an aesthetic of the color red. You would see Kendrick Lamar a lot in the color red, whether it be his performances or music videos or what have you. He would always be in the color red. And when J. Cole decided to issue that mea culpa to Kendrick Lamar, he wore red. Now, I want to show y'all something. Now, look at this. This is the Blueprint 3. This is Jay-Z's album. Who is Jay-Z to J. Cole? We already know that relationship. Right? So Jay-Z put this album out, and who was on this album? Who debuted on this album? J. Cole. Now, the Blueprint 3, right? Jay-Z's favorite color is blue. The blueprint one, the aesthetic, the color was blue. Blueprint two, aesthetic and color was blue. Blueprint 3, the aesthetic and the color is red, black, and white. Really red. Why is that? Because red represents fire. Red represents the sun. Just when it comes to the esoteric understanding in this conveyance, the red represents the sun. It represents fire. So J. Cole pretty much is just, is just a student of the ancient understanding when it comes to esotericism, the Egyptian understanding, going back to the serpent, because this is also in veneration of the serpent. That's why Drake had to step in, because Drake is the serpent. These two pictures right here are synonymous. You got the black and the white, which is interchangeable in the Masonic understanding. And the colors are synonymous. The orange, the yellow, the red, they all synonymous. It represents fire. Even going back to the whole Boaz and Yakim angle, the Masonic angle of fire and ice. The fire is always representative of enlightenment or sun worship, sun god worship. So that's what that is. And then, like I said before, J. Cole has a song on the Might Delete Later album called Pi. And on the Heart Part 4, Kendrick Lamar mentions pi equals 314. So all this stuff is set up. It's all set up. Not taken away from any sort of talents when it comes to, what they represent or what they convey, their exploits. At the end of the day, the world that we live in is a stage. And we have to understand and we have to connect the dots. This represents the 3 bars of the 8 trigrams of the I Ching. And the first one is in veneration of the serpent, as well as the understanding of being at your heights, like heaven. That's what it represents. Is in veneration of heaven. But when it comes to heaven, that's going into the sky god known as Horus or Heru. That's what that's going into. That's why J. Cole, he pretty much did the same thing, and he let you know he covered bases with it in more of a clear, stark way. Because you see right here, this is representative of like a wave, like a heat wave. And you see it's like burning. It has that burning type of element to it. It represents the sun, it represents fire, it represents Heru, Horus, the sun god. That's what it represents. Or the serpent. And like I said, Drake has stepped in after the whole J. Cole mea culpa quote unquote apology, because that's how it's set up. That's how it's set up. Another album cover that represents the first trigram from Nas King's Disease 3 album. And when I look at this, it's kind of like an amalgamation of the first 2 covers we saw. And we continue to see the color red, or colors that's synonymous with the sun or heat. Speaking of the heat, the Miami Heat, they wear the color red. And also they represented that esoteric aspect when it comes to the narrative revolved around Kobe Bryant, because the Lakers, they went against the Heat in the 2020 NBA Finals for a reason. So all of this stuff is always going to be esoteric, especially when it comes to the upper levels, the entertainment industry. That's what it's about. And Nas, he's a big time Mason. I remember a song, I think it's called You're the Man, where he talked about drinking semen and blood. It's crazy in that world, man. But this just continues on, just for further context in regards to the aspect of 3. You see right here, this is the 3 bars. These are the 3 yang lines. Also represents the creative. That's why you have musicians like J. Cole and Jay-Z, because they're creators. This is going into the understanding of Chinese divination. And the god of the Chinese is the serpent. It's the dragon. That's why the dragon is associated with the Chinese. It's the serpent. That's what it represents. And that's why, like I said, you had Drake. Drake, the term Drake, the word Drake, the name Drake, it means dragon. So trigram 1 is heaven, Cayenne or Cayenne, consisting of 3 solid yang lines. Yang stands for heaven, light, and warmth. The trigram represents creativity, since heaven is an ancient Chinese thought regarded as the origin of the world, and the mightiest force in it. It also denotes the dry warming of the sun. The dry warming of the sun, warmth, representing heat. That's why Jay-Z, he conveyed it with the color red instead of the color blue. That's why. Because red is synonymous with fire, right? It also denotes the dry warming of the sun, and it suggests the male principle. It consists of three solid lines, i.e. yang lines. Yang is the principle of light in the heavenly. When we talk about heavenly, it's talking about the sky god. That's what it's talking about. It's talking about Horus or Heru, the sky god. So it has to be represented in abundance in the trigram of heaven. And when I say sky god, I'm not talking about him as a one true god or any sort of true god. They're not true gods. They're pagan gods. They worship, but they go back to people that lived on the earth. Many people that lived on the earth, just in terms of the compositions in regards to the veneration in said region or whatever region, these gods were venerated in. It consists of three solid lines, i.e. yang lines. Yang is the principle of light in the heavenly, so it has to be represented in abundance in the trigram of heaven. It's the ultimate yang. The Chinese character for this trigram, shown above to the right, suggests the drying light of the sun. The drying light of the sun. Interesting. And this is why J. Cole conveyed it in the way that he did when it comes to the album cover for Might Delete Later, as well as Jay-Z on Blueprint 3. And mind you, like I said, just for context, the Blueprint 3, the first two albums, he had the aesthetic with the color blue. On the third album, he has it red, black, and white. But really red representing what the trigram goes back to, which is the sun god. You see, in regards to the stage aspect, when it comes to the predictive programming aspect, how everything plays out, part of it is inspired by Mr. Karl Marx. And Marxism is a very, very big thing in this society. A very, very big thing in this society. Karl Marx was a Mason, and here in this image, you see him pretty much letting you know that with this gesture right here. This right here is pretty much the sign of the master of the second veil, and it's all based in the worship of the pagan gods. Because Freemasonry is just all based in the worship of the pagan gods. It's all the same thing. It all goes back to ancient Egypt, all of it. The Rosicrucian order, Freemasonry, esotericism is all under the same umbrella of the left hand, of Luciferianism. That's what it is. And he died on 314. Pi equals 314. So like I said, everything ties together. J. Cole has a song called Pi on his album featuring Daylight, right? And Absol, ardent Luciferian. He has an album called Do What Thou Wilt. So he has Absol and Daylight on the song Pi. And like I said, the song The Heart Part 4 is pretty much matched up with Might Delete Later, just because of the quote-unquote prophetic aspect of that song, The Heart Part 4. Or, the whole 777 aspect. Kendrick Lamar is a big time Luciferian. Big time plant in the entertainment industry. A talented plant, but a plant nonetheless. Yes, he is. Right? But yeah, Karl Marx is someone who's pretty much an inspiration for the entertainment industry, and what they push in regards to how all these things play out. Also, I think his name is George Hegel when it comes to the Hegelian dialectic, But I'm definitely going to be doing more on this topic in regards to the whole Drake Kendrick Lamar angle. This is only part one.